Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Those Who Wish Me Dead. So what Those Who Wish Me Dead is essentially about is basically we center on the character of Connor, and he is this boy who he's living with his father. Everything seems to be going great, and then all of a sudden one day his father is unexpectedly murdered by these two assassins, and basically now Connor has to go on the run. He ends up running into this smoke jumper played by Angelina Jolie, who basically is going to do what she can to try to help him out and escape these assassins and get out alive and, basically make sure that they can escape as this, but the assassins are going to make that a lot more complicated for him because they also are trying to set this wildfire of sorts, so now they have to do what they can to ultimately survive. So Those Who Wish Me Dead overall, I was very excited for this film. I mean, looking at the cast, but especially looking at the director and things like that, this really seemed like one of those films that could be really entertaining if done well, but maybe also really effective in terms of character and things like that. And it's the kind of film that I usually do get really excited for, so I was really hoping that this film would be something special, and for me, it absolutely did deliver. Now, I will say, this film is much different than you are probably expecting, but overall, I found this to be a very riveting and highly intense film that's probably one of the most high-octane survival thrillers I've seen in quite a bit, but we will just get into right now, starting off with the cast. And I gotta say right now, that's absolutely one of the highlights of this entire movie. I think if the cast was not as good as they really were, I don't think this movie would really work out. Now, the big question, of course, going into this movie is, of course, concerning Angeline Jolie. A lot of people were wary about her being cast in this role. Is this really gonna work for her? Is she going to sell you as this, as this action star? And I will just say right now, for me at least, she absolutely sold it. I loved what she ended up doing there. Her character, Hannah, has gone through a bit of trauma within her life, and I think Jolie delved into that really well, but you also just see how fearless of a performance this really is. I mean, Hannah really is someone that does whatever she can to survive, and she doesn't really care how she survives. It's just a matter of making sure that she survives, and I thought that she did a really great job in this film. I definitely see a big future for her in terms of action films. I've always thought that she was a really good action star, even in things like Tomb Raider, which is a really dumb movie, but a great guilty pleasure. Even in stuff like that, I'm like, Angelina Jolie can absolutely kick ass. Angelina Jolie can absolutely convince me that she's a real action star, and she definitely does a really good job with that here. I really did enjoy her performance, but Finn Little is really, I think, one of the big standouts in this film. I've never really seen him before, but he plays the character of Connor, and I thought he did an excellent job in this film. Every emotion out of this character felt very genuine. It felt like he was legitimately impacted by what happened, and, with child performances, it can be very tough to really convey, the sense of what Connor's going through, but Little absolutely carries this entire film, and I really liked what he ended up doing here. I thought he gave a very emotional, but also a very riveting performance, one you very much do find yourself locked into, and the chemistry between him and Jolie, these two just work really well together. They bounce off each other really nicely, and I think they help sell that bond really well, and I think the two of them did a really great job carrying this film on their own. But I have to say, the supporting cast here is really what makes this entire movie. I mean, the supporting cast here is just phenomenal, especially when it comes to the combined effort of Nicholas Hoult and Aidan Gillen. And I don't want to spoil too much of what they really do in this film, but these two characters have to be some of the most menacing and some of the most, terrifying villains I've seen in a film in quite a bit. I mean, you really do feel just how threatening these guys are, mainly because of how unpredictable they are. I mean, these are two assassins that will really do anything to get their way, to make sure that they get to this kid. They don't care how they do it, they just want to make sure it happens, and that is what really terrifies you, because you don't know what lengths they're really willing to go. You don't know what lines they will not cross in that way, and I just loved every single second of what they were doing. They were both so dynamic in this role, but they were also just so utterly disturbing, and I loved what they ended up doing here. They were some of the best parts of this entire movie. Jon Bernthal is also really good here, as usual. He definitely does give a really strong performance, but I gotta say, Medina Senghore kind of gave him a run for his money. I mean, I have never really seen her before in really anything, but I absolutely hope, but after this film, I absolutely hope we do, because she killed it in this film as the character Allison. She has one scene especially that, for me at least, is going to be a scene I won't be forgetting for quite some time. It absolutely had me on the edge of my seat. I loved what they ended up doing with her character. She was badass, but she also was someone that I found to be very sympathetic in her role. You could tell that she was someone that, again, I don't know if she's acted before, but she really is a natural within all of these scenes, and especially up against, you know, heavy hitters like a Nicholas Hoult or a Jon Bernthal. She really carries herself very well here, and I really do hope after this film we start to see her in a lot more projects, because she absolutely has it in her for sure. This is just overall such an impressive ensemble. I think everyone really did kill it. Easily, the cast alone is one of the best parts of this movie. Alright, well now let's get into the directing and the writing here, which the directing of this film, yeah, I do think people are going to be surprised, because Taylor Sheridan does direct this movie, and it's much different from his other films. It definitely, the one thing I will say that Sheridan does a really great job with is directing tension and directing action in particular, and he absolutely kills it here once again. I mean, you really do feel yourself so many times throughout this movie. I was so on the edge of my seat. I was just white-knuckled with tension, not knowing what was really going to happen, and so I have to really give it to him with doing that when it comes to this film. He really doesn't let up when it comes to just how suspenseful of a film this really is. But yeah, it should be noted, this is definitely far more of a mainstream film than the other ones that he's directed, and I don't really have a problem with that. I feel like, I've said this forever, the best directors are the ones that don't restrict themselves to just one particular genre of film, and that's exactly what Sheridan's doing here. He's trying to do a different kind of movie, one that is still very intense, but is way more of an action film than you're probably expecting. This is not like a very like character-driven drama. That's not slow-moving drama. That's not really what this movie is, and I think what he does a really good job with, again, is just showing how versatile of a director he really is, and I think Sheridan, you know, no matter what he ends up doing from this point forward, I will be there to see him. I think he really does prove that within this film, that he is a director that we need to continually watch out for, because he's going to always deliver on that front, and I think he definitely did. Let's get to the thing that a lot of people, I think, are going to complain about, the screenplay in this movie. I will say right off the bat, yes, this film is way more simplistic than his other films in terms of a story. It really is just, you have this kid, he witnesses his father murdered, he runs into Angeline Jolie, who's sort of dealing with her own past trauma, with her being a smoke jumper and things like that, and now they have to do what they can to evade these assassins and, you know, survive the night, pretty much. That's basically what it is, but I gotta say, though, for once, that didn't really bother me. Normally, I would complain that, oh, these characters feel very one-note, or there's not enough to them, but I think there overall was. I think there was just enough characterization there. I feel like you don't really need to do a lot with this particular premise to generate a sense of tension, to generate a sense of suspense, to generate a sense of to make me feel very uneasy, and I think they did a really good job with that. But what I was very impressed by with the screenplay is that it actually does take a while for the plot to kick in. The film does spend a considerable amount of time getting you to know some of these characters, particularly Hannah. We see very early on in the film that she is kind of aloof. She isn't someone that really likes to talk a lot about what she's gone through, but you can see as a smoke jumper, she's definitely made some mistakes within her life, and that's kind of like eating away at her, but it also gets you to understand why she is so indebted to Connor. Why does she feel like why is she feel like this is her mission? Why is it so important for her to take care of him? And you really do get to see that in the film, and I feel like they did a pretty good job with that. I've heard some people say that it felt like it was pushed to the background, and I didn't really feel that way. I feel like the film gave us enough time to understand Hannah's motivations, and maybe they could have dived into it a little bit more, but I think overall they did a pretty good job with diving deeper into her character, and I think overall she's a really good lead for this film. So I like what they ended up doing with her. And then Jon Bernthal and Medina Senghore's characters as well, they kind of set up their marriage and how good things are there, the fact that she's pregnant, and I think they did a pretty good job with setting that whole plot point up. I definitely did enjoy the way that was handled. So and then you see Connor and his father, and them just kind of, you know, showing their relationship. Connor kind of telling him about, you know, Connor just kind of going back and forth with his father. So when these plots eventually do coalesce, you are that much locked in. You're that much more hooked to see what is really going to happen here. How is this all going to come together? And when it does, I think it really does work in that way. And again, it's because of how good that setup really is. They do a really strong job at introducing you to all these characters, not understanding how they're going to come together, but then realizing they are, and once they do, I think the film really does work in that way. So I definitely really did enjoy this screenplay, especially when it comes to the assassins themselves. I mean, like I said, the characters of Patrick and Jack Blackwell, I mean, these characters are just so unpredictable. The obstacles that are constantly getting in Hannah and Connor's way, you don't know if they're going to be able to fully get out of this situation. And so I think that alone really does work in terms of the screenplay here. I was so nervous for them various times throughout the film, and that really is due to just how good the screenplay is here when it comes to the characters. So I think overall this is still a really good screenplay. I think there's some really good, you know, dialogue exchanges and things like that between Hannah and Connor, so I really didn't have a problem in terms of the screenplay here. Getting into the cinematography, though, that is where this film absolutely excels. I mean, right off the bat, I mean, this film in general really puts you into this environment, particularly when the forest fire starts. Really does kind of feel like a character of its own, and I really did enjoy that a lot. You know, when they set off this fire, it starts off and it's very small, but as the film goes on, you see that fire starts to grow more and more, and you yourself are just as terrified of this fire because you know absolutely what it can do. You know how harmful it could be to our characters, and I think the way that they were able to make that fire seem so realistic and make you really feel that tense environment, I thought they did a really good job with overall. So I was really impressed by cinematography on that front. But then in action sequences, I mean, where to even begin with that? I mean, the action sequences here are really well done. There are many sequences in this film, like I said, particularly one involving Medina Senghore's character and the two assassins that I was so just impressed by how well it was done. I was so surprised by how much I was really getting into it, especially because, like, there is a sense of predictability in this film. I won't lie, there is, but I think the film does a good enough job with making these action sequences so riveting in that way, really getting you to feel a sense of tension throughout the movie, and I think they did a really good job when it comes to the cinematography. Like I said, the action sequences here are just very well filmed overall, and the score here by Brian Taylor, I think, is really good. It definitely adds to the emotion and the intensity of the film, and I will say the film definitely, in terms of the editing, it is a little short, and I think that is something that's going to surprise some people, considering that, you know, when we watch a Taylor Sheridan film, there are certain expectations we have. We expect this very, like, rich characterization. We expect a lot of very heavy themes, and this film, like I said, does not really have that, and so I think for the type of film that it is, I think that the runtime is really good. I never found myself bored by this movie, and the way that it ended, I found to be very satisfying with the way things did wrap up. That being said, I don't think this film is perfect either. I do think there are a few things that do bring it down. One of them being, as much as I do enjoy the character of Hannah, her being a smoke jumper in the movie, it's not really dived into all that much. You see in the beginning of the film that she is someone that is very reckless. A lot of her former coworkers, they don't really like to associate with her. They seem very concerned with her. And I think that's a really good setup because it gets you to understand, you know, that Hannah is someone that doesn't really seem to care much about her well-being. She doesn't really seem to care much about what danger she gets herself into. So when she's eventually in this situation and she then has to protect this kid, you know that she'll do whatever she can to make sure that he gets out of this, and she doesn't really care if she does as well. But the problem is, I do think that we were missing a little bit more when it came to her time as a smoke jumper. They kind of skipped over that, and I would have liked to see more with her. Also, there's a connection that she has to Jon Bernthal's character, and I found that connection to be completely pointless. It's really not brought up that much in the film. I think they could have done a much better job with giving it a bit more purpose, because the setup with what they ended up doing with her character, I thought was actually really good. But the problem is, I really did feel that they did not do a good enough job of diving deeper into that relationship. I found that they wanted everyone to be like really well connected, and I just don't think they did a very strong job with that overall. I think they could have done a better job with connecting that storyline together. So that was something that was just a little bit clunky for me. And I will say, as good as the setup is, the relation between Connor and Owen, it did feel a bit rushed. When Jake Weber's character, you know, is killed very early on in the movie. He's very likable, but we really don't know all that much about him, and I do think they should have taken a bit more time to dive a little bit deeper into that character, so that way we're that much more affected when it ended up happening. But other than that, I found this to be a very enthralling film. It's very intense. It's very riveting. It's a film that constantly had me on the edge of my seat. Yes, it's a bit more simplistic than Sheridan's other films. Yes, it might not have that rich characterization, and I think it is lacking in a couple areas, but I can't deny that this film, considering the reaction that it got out of me, considering just how glued I was to the screen and how I really was so riveted by what was going on, I can't not give this film a really positive score, because at the end of the day, I do think this film overall did do its job. At the end of the day, I do find this film to be a very effective one, and I do think it is one that is overall going to impress you. If you leave those expectations of what you expect in a Taylor Sheridan film out the door, recognize that he's trying to do something a little bit different. I do think this film overall does deliver. At the end of the day, you got a really talented cast here, some really well done action sequences. This film for me was very satisfying. It definitely was the right amount of an adrenaline rush that I really did need. So I am going to give Those Who Wish Me Dead overall a B+. But over, guys, to my review of Those Who Wish Me Dead. Let me know what you guys saw this movie. Left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.